The silent howl. The night was thick with mist as Ethan Parker trudged through the dense forest, his flashlight barely piercing the fog. His German shepherd, Shadow, walked beside him, ears perked, nose twitching. They had been hiking this trail for years, but something felt different tonight, something unsettling. Ethan had lived in Hollow Creek his entire life, a quiet town nestled between the mountains and endless woodlands. He was a journalist, known for chasing urban legends and eerie small-town mysteries, but nothing had ever prepared him for what was about to unfold. Shadow suddenly stopped, growling low in his throat. Ethan tightened his grip on the leash. "What is it, boy?" Then he heard Italong, mournful howl. But it wasn't from Shadow. It came from somewhere deeper in the woods. Shadow barked and pulled forward, dragging Ethan along. His heart pounded as he followed his dog, weaving through gnarled trees until they reached a small clearing. There, standing in the center, was a dog. Not just any dog. It was a massive black wolfhound, its eyes glowing an eerie silver under the moonlight. Around its neck was an old leather collar, a rusted tag hanging from it. The dog stood motionless, staring at Ethan and Shadow as if waiting for something. Then, without a sound, it turned and disappeared into the fog. Ethan's pulse raced. He knew every dog in Hollow Creek, but he had never seen this one before. And something about its eyes told him this was no ordinary stray. Shadow whimpered, glancing at Ethan as if urging him to follow. And so they did. Ethan and Shadow followed the dog's faint paw prints, deeper into the mist. The air grew colder, the silence heavier. It felt as if the forest itself was watching them. Then they found it. A rusted, abandoned cabin stood among the trees, its wooden walls covered in moss and vines. It looked like it had been left untouched for decades, but what caught Ethan's attention was the old sign nailed to the door. Dr. Jonathan Halley, veterinarian. Ethan's breath hitched. He had heard that name before years ago. Dr. Halley had been the town's vet, a kind man who had mysteriously disappeared 30 years ago. Some said he had gone mad. Others believed something sinister had happened. Shadow whimpered again, scratching at the door. Ethan hesitated before pushing it open. Inside, dust covered every surface. Old furniture sat untouched, and faded photographs hung on the walls. But then Ethan's eyes landed on something unusual. An open journal on the desk, its pages untouched by time. He picked it up and read the last entry. "They told me to stop. They said it was unnatural, but I had to do it. I had to save him. I couldn't let him go. But now he won't stop watching me. I hear him in the woods. His howl never fades. Have I made a mistake?" The signature at the bottom sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Dr. Jonathan Halley. Before Ethan could process it, Shadow growled, his fur bristling. Ethan turned and froze. The wolfhound was back, standing just outside the door. Its silver eyes bore into Ethan's. And suddenly, a memory surfaced in his mind, one he didn't even know he had. A newspaper article from years ago. Local veterinarian attempts experimental procedure to save his dying dog. Both vanish without a trace. Ethan's grip on the journal tightened. This wasn't just any dog. This was Dr. Hale's dog, and it had never died. Ethan scoured the cabin, searching for more clues. In the back room, he found something that sent a chill down his spine. A hidden door leading to a basement. Dusting off the cobwebs, he pried it open and descended. The air was damp. The walls lined with old medical equipment. Jars filled with strange liquids sat on rusted shelves. But what caught his eye was a single, tattered notebook sitting on a workbench. He opened it and gasped. The pages contained sketches, formulas, and frantic notes, all detailing something impossible, a way to extend a dog's life. Dr. Halley hadn't just tried to save his dog. He had succeeded. But at what cost? A low growl rumbled behind him. Ethan turned slowly, his heart hammering. The wolfhound stood in the doorway, eyes gleaming like molten silver. But this time, there was something else, something almost human in its gaze. Then Ethan noticed the tag on its collar. With trembling fingers, he reached for it. The engraving was barely legible, but he could make out one word. Argos. Shadow barked, but not in fear, in recognition. Because Argos wasn't just any dog, it was Dr. Hale's dog, and it had been waiting for its owner to return. Ethan's mind raced. If Dr. Hale's experiment had worked, it meant Argos had been alive alone for over 30 years. Loyal, waiting, searching. But something had gone wrong. The town believed Hale had vanished. But what if he had tried to undo what he had done? Ethan had to find out. Leaving the cabin, he followed Argos deeper into the woods, Shadow at his side. The mist thickened until, at last, they reached a small, unmarked grave beneath a towering oak tree. A single weathered tombstone stood in front of it. Dr. Jonathan Hale, 1952. The second date was missing. Ethan's throat tightened. Had Hale died here? Had he buried himself in his final moments, knowing his mistake? Or had something buried him? Argos let out a soft whimper and lay down beside the grave, resting his head against the cold stone. And then, for the first time in decades, the silver glow in his eyes faded. Ethan watched in silent awe as the wolfhound's breathing slowed. Argos had waited, alone, for someone to find the truth. And now that it was known, his watch was over. The great dog let out one last sigh, and then, just like a whisper in the wind, he was gone. Epilogue. Ethan returned to town, his mind haunted by what he had witnessed. He told no one of the cabin, the journal, or the secret of Argos. Some stories, he realized, were not meant to be shared. But every now and then, when the fog rolled in and the night was quiet, Ethan swore he could still hear it, the faint, distant howl of a loyal dog, forever guarding the woods, waiting, watching, and never forgotten.